We knew things were bad, but we didn't know how bad. When the electricity went off, we figured it wouldn't be for long. Prison is a separate reality from the outside. We're largely detached from what goes on out there. So at first we thought that the problems, whatever they were, would not affect us, not much anyhow. Boy, were we wrong. They called us late to breakfast on Monday, never a good sign. Nobody was surprised when they announced that there would be no programs that day. Pissed off, yeah, but not surprised. We knew the drill. Lucky for me, yard wasn't one of the carrots in this mule's day. Likewise, my cellie. Glenn was a real son of a bitch, but at least we could live together. He was a bundle of paradoxes, a grade school dropout, yet he had read and appreciated Shakespeare. Mean as a snake one day, unbelievably kind and generous the next. When I was first put into his cell, he treated me as though he regarded me as a major imposition. But that winter, my first in prison, when he saw me shivering, he traded a cup of his best cell-made whiskey to get me a pair of thermals. Try as he might to seem a complete asshole, he was the one who came through to help others in tough times. Glenn was the one who fixed your hot pot, radio, or TV if it could be fixed. He charged for his work, but he stood by his workmanship. They cell-fed us bagged lunches for dinner, which was highly irregular. The guards weren't saying much or answering questions. From the beginning, we had wondered what was going on, but after a while, Glenn and I amused ourselves by playing dominoes and joking around that first day. By nightfall, we were beginning to worry. We went to sleep early, hoping everything would be better, or at least normal, when we woke up. No such luck. As far as we could tell, there were only the minimum number of guards manning second watch, the main shift, the first day. And nobody showed up the second. No guards, medical staff, or free staff. Things were getting too weird. Glenn had a pretty good radio, the best available, a Sony boombox. Try as we might, we couldn't get any signal though. From scrap pieces of several defunct radios he'd been working on and strands of wire from various cords and other appliances, he assembled a homemade super antenna and somehow rigged the radio to pick up citizens' band transmissions. Even then, it wasn't much more than static. For one brief instant, we zeroed in on a distorted communication that sounded like some truckers talking. What we heard was incredible and unimaginably grim. Stores were being looted, the highways hopelessly jammed with traffic, hospitals overwhelmed. Something catastrophic was happening. A twinge of alarm crept up my spine and coursed through my veins. Even then, I refused to consider what was creeping into the back of my mind, the worst case scenario. The radio soon gave out, the batteries dying quickly from the strain of Glenn's contraption. Left in silence, all of Glenn's characteristic bravado was gone now, and even my best efforts to find some philosophical and scientific explanation that was both rational and optimistic failed dismally. When the sink tap yielded no hot water, I had the disturbing thought that even the cold water might be cut off before long. Right away, Glenn and I set about filling up every empty container in the cell with fresh water. Also, I made a check of our food supplies. I had taken a full canteen draw the previous week, and I had recently received a quarterly package from my brother. The best stuff had already been eaten up, but we still had easily 2 or 3 weeks worth of supplies, maybe a month's worth if we rationed carefully. I foresaw greater problems with the water, which was prophetic during the night it shut off. Glenn always spoke of himself as a convict, never as an inmate. He'd been in prison over 20 years, I for less than 2. He might have been clueless about grammar and abstract ideas, but he was a veteran of institutional life, and I rarely questioned his judgment on practical manners. He said that we should use the 16-ounce coffee jars for solid waste, the sink drain for urinating, the stored water and the other containers for drinking, and the reservoir of still clean water in the toilet bowl for washing. Glenn had far too many prejudices and ill-formed ideas and opinions, but he was a genius at figuring out mechanical problems. He understood how things worked. And more importantly, he knew how to get most things working again when they broke down. Assessing our situation, he told me that he believed we could get out of the cell, but it would take a few days. The problem was we didn't have a few days. Nature had dealt us both a bad hand in that. Glenn was diabetic, and a severe childhood illness left him epileptic. Both his condition and mine were controllable with daily medication, but in prison, medications are rationed in daily allotments, and we weren't going to be getting any more of those where we were now. So we had no insulin and no Dilantin and no medical staff coming in to distribute them. Even if we managed to escape from this prison, nature had somehow sentenced us to a prison of her own making for life, however long or short that happened to be. Cold coffee, food from pouches, the last of the bread from sack lunches. The belly was grateful, but the mind recoiled. By day we sweltered, by night we shivered. Emergency lighting leered at us through the window from the yard, while the cells languished without electricity, water, or ventilation. It all seemed choreographed to mock our misery. The morning of day 4, or 8, or 20 came, who knows? Time becomes irrelevant without hope. I couldn't wake Glenn up. I called his name, shook him, nothing worked. Even through the horrible funkiness permeating our cell, I could detect a strange, pungent, cloying odor on his breath. Glenn had gone into acute acidosis. By noon, he was dead. I threw myself into working frantically at the cell door. I felt any other route would be futile. A few years ago, this very cell had housed a prisoner known as Crazy Ike. He had managed to chip away several inches of concrete from the wall to the outside. If the rebar hadn't been there, he might have made it out of here. I don't know how some of the other inmates got out of their cells. Glenn claimed that he knew the secret. Years ago, he had even written letters to the administration in hopes of cutting a deal that would set him free, shorten his sentence, or at least get him some cushy housing in return for such vital information. No one took him seriously. Obviously, the flaw in the door's design was not nearly as significant as Glenn had thought. It wasn't long until I gave up on the door. I stared out the window, wondering what the hell was going on out there. Had they finally done it? Had the powers that be finally pushed us all to the limit? Was this indeed the end of the world? A lethargy of despair as well as fatigue overwhelmed me. With my waning strength, I wrapped Glenn in his sheets and blanket and then lowered him to the floor. After moving my mattress and bedding to the upper bunk, I put Glenn and his bedding on the lower one. With the last of my energy, I climbed up and lay down on the top bunk. I felt this strange dissociative state that foreshadows the approach of the seizure creep up on me. And I hoped that when it came, the resulting fall and blow to the head would end this nightmare. Hope, fear, regret, all fell away with one final thought. La commedia è finita. It's over. God will understand.